I'm back for round two with my collage decks, so I hope you'll join me today and have a second gander at the next batch of collage decks that I have in my collection. We will be going through quite a bit of decks, both tarot, oracle, and some free-for-all decks, we'll call them. Just like my part one to my collage decks, I will be grouping these decks in loose categories and we will be discussing the artwork amongst them. So, if you enjoy art and design talk, if you're curious about the way that I see artwork in decks and some of those art fundamentals, so definitely stick around and let's talk collage art. The first deck that we will be discussing is the newest collage deck that I have, and this is the Couture Tarot. I'm really excited about this deck. Just look at this production quality. REDFeather really did a great job bringing this fashion collage tarot deck to life through these production choices. It feels really luxe, it feels special, it's different. The orientation of the box and the way you open it is also unique. So I want to thank Red Feather for sending me a copy of this. I am really excited to share it with you today. As I mentioned, I think the high production value of this deck is definitely a huge factor in this deck. I think the theme plays beautifully throughout the production selections. So let's open it. So we have this really great band that highlights the title of the deck, and you get a hint at the artwork here. I really love that peekaboo sneak image. It definitely invokes curiosity. The first thing that I felt was really unique about this deck is the way that it opens in this orientation into this position. My one critique design wise was I wish this panel was rotated so we were getting the view in this way. It just throws off the way we're opening and being invited into the deck in this box. I don't even mind that this artwork is vertical instead of horizontal. I think it still looks cool. If this panel was rotated, it would really sell this more, especially because we are met with the book facing horizontally as well. So then we pop open the book here, and this book, once again, really high production quality. The guidebook writing is wonderful. Some entries talk about and reference the artwork and some of the collage pieces that were selected. Some speak more to just the tarot itself, and it has a really great neutral personality to it. It's not leaning you one way or the other, but it feels very approachable, very personable, easy to get into. This is one that does happen to speak to the imagery in the write up. You can see we are continuing the design theme that matches the box, the gold, the fonts used, and we get lots of visual imagery throughout here. It's a very beautifully designed guidebook, and like I said, I really enjoyed the writing in this. So, like I mentioned about this panel in this box, you could say the same thing about the deck being faced this way to then pop out. I don't mind that it's rotated because it still makes sense. It's just this panel because the text is facing the wrong way that the orientation of the box is designed. It just makes it awkward and it makes it seem like it's a mistake. Love the inside collage of this box. It's a whole experience, and that's something I look for when I am moving my way through a new deck. How's the theme and how's the design and art play out through every single piece that you interact with? And so far, this has done a beautiful job. Let's go ahead and put this off to the side and take a peek at the artwork. So once again, we're playing out those design elements and choices throughout the card template as well. We have that navy with the gold. We have the gold edging here, and it's a full meal package deal. I love to see that. All right, we'll set the book off to the side and get into this artwork now officially. So what I noticed right away with this collage style, it is a more heavier, a more visually dense style of collage. We do sometimes get some more open white space areas, and there is a smaller focus on single subject matter. I love it the most when there are figures or things being created from the multiple pieces of collage. This stays in its fashion theme very well. If you are a fan of fashion magazines, that high end designer brands, this would definitely connect with you. It has that era and that essence of collaging with your fashion magazines. I loved doing that when I was younger, and it's a really enjoyable process. So, some of those themes of imagery and pieces you can really start to peek and find, like hints of jewelry cutouts, flowers, that sort of high end imagery you will definitely find throughout here. I love it when the compositions are a bit more pared down visually, and the colors, the textures, and the main subject matter really is allowed to express itself and just be without a lot of visual noise. This is great. This has so much energy through this burst of this crown or this bracelet, this ring, whatever this is, with this owl bursting out from the woman behind it and these two shoes almost acting like the scales in justice. Lots of energy in that one. This deck does a beautiful job of color work. There is a lot of color play. This is an interesting juxtaposition of dark and light, color and solid. There's a lot to the artwork in here, and I think this is a very original concept for a collage deck. I am, I would say, a style girly versus a fashion girly. I've always been really attracted to fashion and style and design, but really in the ways of mixing and matching and making it your own. So while I enjoyed these types of magazines and imagery, I definitely leaned more towards a not a modern street style, but a underground street style, if you know what I mean. I grew up really loving Fruits. If you're familiar with that, it's the Japanese street style magazine. So I really like that DIY original take on fashion. And some of that definitely comes through here with the hand done tactileness of the collage work. I really love this moon card. We have a great focal point, really high contrast from this focal point to the background. When you think about collage artwork, think about the elements of the composition. We have the background, we have the foreground, we have the main subject matter, and then we have those secondary elements, those secondary subject matters that frame the main focal point. So that's the way I really break down artwork. And you have to forgive me because I come from a space in advertising, and the most clearest, simplest, cleanest execution is always the one that performs the best. So the more layered, the more complex, the more ethereal, the more conceptual pieces don't perform, because think about capturing someone's attention in a literal glance. You can't do that with a dense visual, which is why tarot is so great, because you get to sit with the artwork and really work through these layers. Here we go. Ace of Wands, we have a really strong focal point, and we're getting into this color play here that the suits have that I picked up on, that I think is so great, and that not all decks really play into. And I'm speaking for myself as well, but we have the Wands, so we're thinking, fiery passion, energy, creativity, and these pinks, reds, orange, fuchsias really speak to that element, really speak to the suit, and it plays beautifully throughout. So, this is a great way of bringing continuity across your artwork in a collage deck, in any deck, really. And it's not hitting you over the head, it's not forcing it down your throat, it's just there. It's purposefully and thoughtfully placed and incorporated. It feels like a natural fit. How cool are all these shoes for the Eight of Wands, and they're moving in this very dynamic, directional composition here. So as we move through the wands, let's just bump through this briefly. We hit the cups here and we have these blues, these purples, these more softer tones to play into the water element, to play into the emotional relationship, imagination, the dreamscape of the cups of water. And we're playing into some of that imagery here. We have a bathtub, a shell, we have some flamingos, which stand in the water. So this deck does a really great job of thinking about all these elements, art-wise, tarot-wise, visual-wise, and it plays into that beautifully. You get a bit of this tactileness with the hand-done collage work. We hit a muted space into this Five of Cups. We get this really deep, luscious blues and dark purples in the Six of Cups, with I think really harkens to that nostalgia, that childhood. It feels like antiquity, like it just feels really luxe, right? We move into the seven and we're starting to get these other hues, but we're still getting a shell, we're still getting coral, we're getting these hints of the water element still. Let's check out some of the court cards. So we have a mermaid as a page. This Knight of Cups really reminds me like it's being pulled in different directions. We have this sort of disjointed figure on the right-hand side of the composition, and almost like what this knight is looking to on this left side. Let's check the guidebook to see if anything is mentioned about the imagery. Okay, Knight of Cups. Another great thing about this guidebook is you get plenty of keywords to go off of. I would say this is definitely beginner friendly and a seasoned reader friendly as well. There's something you will get out of it. So let me quickly read here. Okay, great. So this figure is representing more of a pirate and those desires and tendencies and those sort of shadowy aspects of relationships and emotional connections. So that's very interesting. We get the hint at like the striped pirate here with the fabric. So you can really see if you just take a peek in the guidebook, read it, and then see where those connection points are. They're definitely there. Like I said, my favorite is when the subject matter is very clear and contrasted from the background and foreground. But once again, like I said, that's just my personal taste. We're into the swords here. I like how clear that imagery is. This is fun, the different textures, the color block. Of course, there's the two poodly type dogs. I'm always going to like a dog image. And yeah, I think this is a really strong collage deck, especially if you like these more visually dense collage styles. This is an analog collage, so if you are more of a handmade collage person, that's another sort of tick in the box for you. The theme is well played throughout. There's strong consistency throughout the imagery. Nothing has felt jarring. Everything feels very cohesive in terms of the imagery and the concepts displayed here. You definitely get that fashion element. I love the sort of disjointed face and figure. I think this style is really strong. I like to see multiple pieces made into one piece versus a more designy approach in the composition and placement. I like the figures because that really brings me back to fashion collage, is making figures, making new outfits, accessories, creatures from multiple pieces. I think that's the most exciting and thrilling. Like this, the ring feels like the crown on top of the owl that's on top of the person, the tree in the background. Like it gives you some narrative to go off of. And I'm not saying that those ones that are less that don't. It's just the way I see things. So this is really great. I am going to keep this around and see how it pans out for me. You know me, I definitely like a little bit more of a pulled back collage style, as we'll get into later in this video. But I think for a visually dense composition, I do really like it because there's a lot of color play, texture play. I love fashion elements, so seeing the shoes, the jewelry, the bags, the outfits, The figures, that's right up my alley. I love these like rich, bold colors. The pentacles feels alive. It feels like reality. A fantastical reality, right? But it feels like that material world with these strong saturated colors. And here are the card backs, once again, playing beautifully into the theme. We've got the jewelry and on the book. We have like this watch outline here. This was really cool. I'm going to have to play around with some pairings because I think I have some really great pairings this would play beautifully into. And like I said, I'm definitely keeping this and seeing how it reads for me. I have just flipped through this on my own and read some of the guidebook before sharing it with you. But I feel like paired in my patchwork style, reading style that I do, this deck will really shine being balanced out with one or two more paired back decks. So this could really do the shining, as you know, I always say. If you'll have to let me know if you have this deck, what do you think of it? I really thought at first glance that this would be too busy for me, but flipping through and talking through this with you and breaking down the artwork and just sitting with it a bit more and looking at the elements, referencing the guidebook to get those snippets of jumping points, because the guidebook will reference certain pieces of artwork, which then at times it makes me focus in on that and see that piece as the focal point, which settles my eye in the composition. So there's a lot to offer here. You should definitely check this out. And like I said, let me know if you have this. A deck that I have talked about endlessly on this channel recently, it feels like, the Tiger Tarot. I felt like this was a really great next deck to look at from our previous deck because this deck also uses a more busier collage style. It has these created creatures and figures and a really strong focal point when at times when it feels busy. If you really break it down and look at it, there's not much to it. We have the foreground with the sticks, the wands in the front. We have mid-range there, we have our figure, and then we have our background, which is a zoomed in illustration. And then we have these couple bits and bobs that frame and balance the composition with the figure. So if you really want to kind of break it down in chunks, there's maybe 5 or 6 elements in this card, which really isn't that much in the grand scheme of things. I like how different this deck is. The guidebook's different. The artwork's interesting. It's very thought provoking. And I feel like I'm always picking up something new every time I work with this deck. It uses a lot of nature elements in unique ways and different compositions to reform, recreate those into something new. Once again, that's what I love about collage. I like taking pieces and making it look like something new, and that it was always started that way too. So for me, I like to see a little less hand done. I like crisper, cleaner, and direct artwork. But once again, that plays into my commercial professional side. I have just worked and been trained with that perspective and point of view when I look at design and artwork. But the Tiger Tarot does busy in a controlled chaos way, which I think speaks to the artist's level of professional art experience, the way that they're able to balance all that chaos and still have a very clear composition takes a level of technical skill and eye. Not saying that any other decks don't do that. That's just what I'm saying for this one particularly, as I know how challenging at times it can be to balance all these different colors and textures and different elements and creatures and objects and still having something that feels very balanced and easy on the eyes. It's a feat. Like it takes a lot of work to get there. This one's super fun. So Tiger Tarot here is definitely one of my top picks for quote unquote busy collage. Here we have the Craft Decadence Oracle and the Noisy Museum Tarot. And I think these two balance the busy, the hand done with the clean compositions, especially the Oracle. There's a really clear point of view for the subject matter. There's limited pieces in this one. We have a focal center point, and then we have maybe 2 or 3 additional imageries, and then we're moving on. It keeps the eye focused on the artwork. It keeps the eye focused on the main point, the main subject matter that plays into the information on the card below there. I think that makes it for a smoother, faster reading when you don't have the time or can't take the time to slow down with more pieces in the visuals to interpret and process into your message. Sometimes you really just need to latch on to like that 1 or 2 things in the imagery plus the keyword or whatever and take that to form. So this collage does that really well. And then the Noisy Museum does it as well. There's just more layers and pieces to this one. And it forms more of a, I don't want to say landscape, but it forms more of a full world, a full scene picture versus this feels just, these feel like floating art compositions, just a collage on a background, which I definitely create that way as well. Where this feels like the figures feel mostly in scale to the background, to the scene, to the other imagery. This one does a nice job of feeling that hand done element. I think it plays nicely to the antique photographs and artwork used. It's very timely. It goes with the theme. There are some digital elements in there, and it's a good balance. There's great color play, there's great composition. We're getting clear subject matter, background, foreground, secondary imagery here. And of course, they look fabulous together. And if you are someone that really loves the fine art or public domain imagery, these two definitely play into that beautifully. I haven't been able to use them yet. As you can see, they are in order, and now I'm putting them out of order, but that's okay. I think these two are really great and balance that layered style with very clear and bold compositions. This is my trimmed Frau Grand Duchess Tarot, and this is the Lydia Jacob Story Oracle, we'll call it. It is basically an art deck. There's no keywords, it is just existing artwork, and I love it. So for the tarot here, I trimmed off that super cute chain border. I love the style. I thought it fit beautifully with the artwork. However, because it was the most strongly contrasted piece on these collages, my eye only ever went to the frame and it totally pulled away from the collage artwork here. So, trimming off that chain, even though I loved it, really gave a tighter composition to the artwork. One, because the backgrounds all use this mint color, so with the chain and then the border outside of the chain being the same background color, it kind of all just like bled to the edges and your eye never sat in the center, which is the focus of the card. So trimming this down has really just brought these imagery to life. It's really made the collage pop off the card. It's given it so much direction and focus, and I totally love it. Like I said, I still love the chain so much. I'm almost tempted to like have both versions because I do adore it that much, but my eye just never landed on the artwork itself. I think if the chain was there with the mint edges still, but these backgrounds were collaged and weren't just the solid color, I think it would work. It was just the combination of the background bleeding through the frame to the edge that just really stopped me in my tracks. However, like I said, I love the way it looks trimmed down, and it's such a nice little size too. This collage style does a great job of balancing few layers but bold compositions. It takes a little to do a lot. And I think that is a harder thing to grasp when you're creating artwork. It's actually more challenging to have less than it does to have more. And once again, that kind of plays back into my experience professionally in marketing, in advertising. Less is more for a reason. Our brains can only process and digest so much. And I think this one does a good job of balancing feeling full, feeling visually dense, having these key points for your eyes to land on, and still having layers. And then the Lydia Jacobs story here. This one is a very me deck. I used to collage in this way when I was in design school. Like this right here is very me, very my style. I like one piece on top of another, and the more sort of odd connections you can make, the better. And that's what I love about this deck. It really pushes you to use your imagination. It's great to use as almost like a clarifier card just to push the visual message more if that's somewhere you're looking for clarity. It's totally wacky and it's totally cool. It has great style. It's got that mixed media feeling to it. And I love the use of the antique illustrations layered on top of old paintings or diagrams. It's just great. It's just me. And it's one that I just enjoy for it being what it is. Like this right here is totally me. I love to see interactions of objects in scenes. Once again, making the collage look seamless and like it always began that way. That's my sweet spot with collage. You can see in this one, there are some mixed media drawing styles as well, but it still feels collagey because we still have the layering of backgrounds, other pens and markers and utensils in that way. So it's really cool. It's totally different. Do not buy the one on Etsy. It is a counterfeit. If you are looking for this deck, only buy the one that has the glossy box with the gold text. We have the Vertical Oracle and the Road to Nowhere Oracle, and these two definitely get into the territory of my collage style. The simpler, the better for me personally. And the Vertical Oracle over here does more of me. Let me see. I think I have all the landscape ones set aside for now. Let me just get those out of the way. Although they are great, let's just look at the vertical ones for now. As I was saying, the vertical oracle is definitely more in my lane in how I create personally. The Road to Nowhere does a really great job of mixing design with collage. I love this bold, thick yellow border to it. It offsets all the different sources of the collage imagery pieces because some will feel a little bit modern, some will feel more antique, some feel a little more 80s, some feel a little, sometimes I have a hard time when I can tell the mixing of sources and those eras don't totally jive well. But because we're adding in the design element of this thick border, it almost offsets that and unifies everything. And I think it really gives it personality to the collage work as well. So the different sort of more modern meets more antique, all kind of jumble together and meet in a place in the middle because of the bolder, simpler compositions. So these two are definitely right up there for me. I adore them both. There are a couple of cards in the Vertical Oracle that I have made artwork that is very reminiscent of. I think that is so amazing when genuinely you have no idea of another existing artwork and you happen to create something in a very similar vein. It totally happens. And now that's not to say that there isn't copying that happens, but let's just put that aside. I do believe that people can create things at different times unknowingly and have a lot of similarities. So these ones are cool. This one actually feels a bit more modern in its overall imagery. And at first, that was a little not my speed, but this, if you know, I'm just going to cut myself off. If you know of my great grandmother's Faded Frontier deck, my hot water collage, the iron on top of the water, we have the plunger on top of the water. Here is one of those that would be in a very similar way, totally unknowingly. So yeah, these two are cool. These two are great. Very me. This was my unicorn deck. I absolutely love this deck. This one is newer to me, and I haven't totally used it in full yet, but it's one that I think really fondly of. You know, there's just like some decks that you don't grab for all the time, but when you scan over them or think of them, you're like, I just love that one. And it's almost like you love it so much you feel like you don't need to use it all the time. Do you have any of those? I should have put this one in with the last group, but saying the title reminded me that I didn't pull it out when preparing for this video, so we're just going to slide it in here. Even though, like I said, it would fit better in the last category because it uses a photo as a background and one single paper cutout for the subject matter. So it definitely fits in the previous group of more simple, clean compositions in collage style, but we'll just rock it with these two. So we have the Long Way Home Oracle and the Yabaton Keys Oracle. Both of these use more of a layered style, but done very cleanly. The Long Way Home uses this rectangle layering style, and it does move your eye through the composition very well through the use of the text box and the background boxes, plus with those boxes as the subject matter. So your eye always kind of has a place to land and move around and make that cycle through, make that circle through the composition. I definitely look for that in artwork. And this one does a great job in having clean layers, great use of color and texture together, and it doesn't feel overwhelming to the senses. The Abaton Keys here does a great job of having multiple cutouts that feel like they were meant to be as one, which once again we've discussed. I really like that. You know, this is creating this sort of like altar space. We have a really strong, clear center focus here, allowing those secondary pieces to be picked up. It has strong compositions. So while you're getting a lot of different pieces in here, not as much as the first two decks we looked at, this is definitely more simplified collage artwork, which once again we've discussed. It's using still we have multiple pieces in the background, we have multiple pieces in the foreground, and we have multiple pieces in the mid-ground, mid-range there. And it works. It doesn't feel overwhelming. We've got big, bold, clear use of scale and space in the composition. That's something else I look for in artwork, in decks. I want to see strong use of scale, strong use of space, white space, asymmetrical compositions. Symmetrical compositions are great too, but asymmetrical always feels a bit more dynamic and allows you to play in those blank spaces while still having a clear central focus. So these three are really great as well, all in their own ways. We have the Faceted Garden Oracle, the Rain Shadow Tarot, and the Illuminated Earth Oracle, all by Claire Mack. And I love Claire's mixed media style collage. She has a true grasp on the technical aspects of art, really strong use of space, of scale, color, texture, and has that really great eye for design as well. So those really clean compositions and knowing where to push and pull back the layers of imagery, of color, of texture. The use of the mixed media with the layers really brings in that nature aspect that is used so heavily throughout the 3 decks here. I really enjoy Claire's eye for balancing art and design because that is something that I naturally gravitate towards. The use of shape and color is played throughout super strongly in all 3 decks here. These are gorgeous decks. The artwork is stunning. There is definitely artistry to these decks, and especially if you love more of a tactile feel, more of that hand done feel, but with clean use of those layers. You can still feel the hand, but it's not messy. It's purposeful. Your eye moves through the composition really well. I really appreciate the use of size throughout here for each piece of the imagery. You know, not everything is the same size throughout. And if there is a mimic of size, it feels very purposeful. These are just beautiful artworks. They read wonderfully. They pair wonderfully with so many of my decks and in different styles. And that's the thing with collage decks, right? You feel like, gosh, there's so many layers, there's so many elements to one card that you feel like they won't pair with a lot. But once you actually start pairing collage decks with other styles, especially, it's an illustration style that's a bit more simpler. They really work together, and it's always that unexpected pairing that you thought, dang, I really didn't think these were going to work, but here we are, and I'm loving it. And I find that I always discover that with collage decks. And it's just that added layer of surprise and bonus to collage decks. I feel like you're always just discovering something. And these 3 definitely do not let you down in that avenue. They're just gorgeous. And they do well with pairing with decks that are busier too, because like the Illuminated Earth Oracle is a lot of textures, a lot of shapes, very geometric, designy composition. So pairing this with something busier totally works. Versus Rain Shadow and the Faceted Garden works really well with something that uses color and like clean lines and like more simplified lines. Works wonderfully because then it allows the imagery in these 2 to really pop. So these 3 are just really great, and I absolutely love Claire's work. For this next group, I am categorizing these as clean digital collage styles. We have the Oracle of Oddities, the Fairy Tale Oracle, and Coastal Curiosities Naturalist Edition here. And these 3 decks use collage digitally in a very clean way. Even the Fairy Tale Oracle here has use of limited backgrounds with a main focal point in the center, and the Oracle of Oddities and Coastal Curiosities uses these floating collage compositions on a background. So we have really clean and clear focal points throughout all 3. Your eye isn't moving all over the composition. There is strong use of scale, strong use of hierarchy through imagery, and it's very clear what you are to be breaking down and interpreting. The Fairy Tale Oracle gives you what the object is as the main keyword. The Oracle of Oddities allows the keyword to express the visual here. And Coastal Curiosities does something similar as well, where the artwork is reflected in the keyword and vice versa. It's almost like looking at a piece of artwork on a museum wall, reading the plaque of the artwork title, and then standing and staring at the artwork and seeing what you can connect from there. But these 3 use a very clean collage style to their executions, and it's very easy to digest and to look at. It's easy on the eyes. Color palettes are very cohesive and united. The compositions are also very streamlined. You know what to expect card to card. Your eye lands in a similar space. We know we're always going to hit that center point in the size of the card, and we're landing there and we're looking at the keywords. and we're moving on. So I really look for that in artwork. Like I keep saying, I like keywords, I like phrases that are explaining the artwork in another layer. Wow, this one tells you very literally what you're looking at. You're getting the 3 keywords underneath that then you can build upon that sort of curiosity and then make your own interpretation, where this is giving you like an art title to interpret the artwork through that concept. And that's definitely where my mind goes through Oracle decks. I do look at them in that way, in an art title sense, to digest, interpret, and to form a message from there. These two are a little bit of an oddball in between group, but I'm trying to move from clean digital collage to semi-busy digital collage, and then our last group after this. So we have the Living Oracle here. This is 2 decks. This is the Dreaming in the Blue Hour edition and the Dancing in the Violet Moonlight edition. I've just combined them into 2. And this is the French edition of Tell Me You Love Me, but it's the second one. So there are 2 decks out in French, and this is the newest one. I showed the first one in my part 1 of my collage decks video. So we'll take a peek at these. I think these do a good job of using digital plus adding some tactile elements to it. The Tell Me You Love Me is a bit cleaner in terms of its layers. It feels more natural, as if it was already one. This one, you can tell the pieces, but they still blend into a scene and have some of these sort of hand-done looking elements in terms of like doodles and little design details, just as well as this has tattoos on the people that feel obviously digital but look as one. This second deck in this series here has a cleaner collage style versus the first deck feels a lot more ornate, a lot more gaudy in a good way. The layers are definitely toned down and pulled back in this version here. The scale also feels a bit smaller between all the elements versus the first deck has very large, bold scale focal points, and the imagery just really feels all encompassing. This one feels like we're a bit pulled back, which is an interesting take on 1 and 2 decks. I definitely like the more in your face full layers. I thought that's what worked really beautifully about this art style, but it's just a different take. And you know what? It would be interesting to mix the 2 decks together into one huge deck and to see how it feels there, because I think because they're separate and I can tell the different styles of the artwork makes me go, oh gosh, I really like that one better. But if they were together, I feel like it would feel a bit more cohesive. The only thing I just don't love when I see like pop culture references in artwork, especially when we're in such antique feeling styles and then we're adding like a David Bowie lightning bolt to the face. I don't know. I don't love that. I understand it probably plays well into what the write up and the keywords are, but these are just things that pull my eye. These are things I think of. I like design elements to feel more timeless. Once again, that just plays into my experience professionally and how my brain works looking at artwork because of that. So in this little tiny one, so this one is almost similar to the Lydia Jacobs story one we saw, where there's no keywords. It's a total free-for-all deck. And I find those are really great to just stimulate some sort of abstract, out of the box thinking, especially when we are going to use it as a type of almost clarifier card. I think it works really well. Or just use it as a total like wild card spread. What do you get from laying 5 cards down and looking at each imagery? What can you pull from that? It's a great exercise to just push yourself on the visuals and getting a message from the visuals and not always relying on the structure and story of tarot or the structure of an oracle. It's a great creative exercise. My brain just kind of goes there, so I like playing with that. And these little decks here play with digital cutouts Like I said, it has these small doodle bits, these burst lines, these stars. So it feels like that in between of sort of, a little bit journal, a little bit scrapbook. And I really like the idea of just using what cards you want to use. I definitely like some of the cards more than others, of course. There's only one that I pull out because I just don't think it fits very well. And we already passed it, so maybe you noticed it or not. But yeah, these two are a great mix of digital with not being overly busy and not being overly like clean and simple. And when I mean simple, I don't mean like basic. I just mean simple as in like how many layers are used, how many pieces are there. Do the pieces that are used feel busy, even if there's not a lot of them? That sort of thing. The last group we will look at for my collage decks is the Tarot of Beagle Dogs and the Autumn Season Tarot. And these are digital, and I would call them more of a compositing style of collage, of digital illustration. So it's when the artwork is made to look like it's a real scene. Now, this one is a bit more scrapbooky, collagey in terms of like the different little pieces used, but it's still putting the beagle dog into semi-realistic scenes and pieces, like on a bed, in a chair. So that's why I lump these together, out on the lawn. And it's like really cute, a little corny, but it's super sweet. And I just think the pieces that are used speak so well to each scene. Of course, dogs have to have it. And the Autumn Season Tarot is like thinking of every activity and experience you could have in autumn and having that play out in every single card. Like I said, these styles of this compositing, semi realistic layering is not easy at all. This sort of work is where a lot of people struggle, especially myself, because I'm not a drawer. So, light and shadow and perspective is super hard for me. I see things in shapes, I see things in flat shapes, I see things in those sort of five layers, right? Like I keep saying, foreground, midground, background, focal subject matter, and then those like little outer framing pieces. So thinking of things realistically, thinking of the visuals as a real scene is totally hard. And Danielle does a great job of bringing in those realism elements and giving you a very clear theme and concept to the deck. Every scene is unique. I don't think she missed any one fall time activity through here. It's very the vibe. It feels almost like academic autumn. You have sports, you have the home, you have nature, you have the school. It feels really well rounded, and you're getting beautiful, bold colors and scenes that represent autumn. And then back to the beagle dogs over here. Once again, we're getting those scenes, but in a little bit more of a less realistic way. Obviously, a dog is not going to be on a cog, it's not going to be on a clock gear, but it still has perspective. It still uses scale. It's still using scenes to anchor all these collage pieces. These two do something similar yet different and really push the digital illustration in a collage style. Well, that was that, folks. I figured we could flip through one of my old sketchbooks as I close out this video. I adore collage. Collage has been my selected art form for over 15 years. For over 10 of those years, I never crossed the line of my analog collage moving into my digital work. And if you are familiar with my story that you could read more of in my Peculiar Pathways guidebook, I was sort of forced into playing around with my collage work digitally, and it really opened things up for me. And then on top of that, of course, working as a creative director and senior graphic designer in the advertising industry, I have really honed a very specific point of view for collage through design. Design was always first for me. Collage was second and separate in terms of personally for me to create. However, my design work always played into my artist perspective and my collage point of view, but they're totally two different styles for me. So I always find it really interesting to check out collage decks to see how people are working and what they're drawn to. I would say that it's really important to look at the past, look to collage artists in history when looking for new inspiration. When we just look at what's around us currently, it doesn't allow us to push the boundaries and to form new ideas when we're just seeing what's right in front of us. When we look to the past, when we look to see what's been done before, we can then take the old and mix it with the new. And that's when you form something of your own. I think it's fabulous to be inspired by each other. But when it comes to execution, when it comes to what you're going to create, look outside of collage. Look outside of tarot. The more disconnected you're looking at inspiration, the more it's going to become your own. If you're interested in fashion, watch the runways. What sort of colors, shapes, textures, what angles are you seeing? What's the makeup, the footwear, the nails? How does that play out then to be inspired for you through artwork? That's where you really find the sweet spot of what to create next. Otherwise, we just stick in this cycle of same. Now, no one's ever really recreating the wheel, so that's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is look at collage artists from 1920. What about the 50s? What about 1970s? What about even looking outside of collage? You know, what were the painters doing in the 1800s, the 1700s? What sort of compositions were they using? What sort of subject matter were they focusing on? All of these things I think are so important, and I would just love to see more decks spark from inspiration outside of decks that already exist. And with that, I hope you enjoyed my next installment of my collage deck collection. I definitely love talking artwork with you all. Do let me know if you have any of those decks and if any of the decks I showed pique your curiosity. I would love to know your thoughts. So until the next video, I will catch you next time. Bye.